The Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin that one of the great rabbis of the Talmud, his name was Rabbi Shua ben Levi, met Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, and he asked him, when is Mashiach coming? When is Mashiach coming? When Mashiach comes, all evil will come to an end, and all mankind will recognize, as we say every day, God will be the king over the whole universe. God will be one, and his name will be one. All evil will be expunged from existence, and it will be absolutely clear. Nothing exists outside of God, and God is the sole power, and there are no other powers other than God himself. So we asked him, Eliyahu is the one who announces the coming of Mashiach. When is he coming? So he said, he could come even today. It's up to you. That if the Jewish people themselves bring the world to a certain level of readiness, he's ready to come. But evidently, if he hasn't come, that means you're not ready to accept him. What does this mean? So the Chafetz Chaim explains, you have a king, and the king has unlimited resources. And they choose the bride who's the future queen. And he says to his potential, the future queen, when do you want to get married? She says, I need a year to prepare. To become the queen, I have to purchase things. I have to get myself ready to be in the role of the queen. It'll take about a year. The king inquires after a year, and he realizes she's not ready. But the king is always ready. He was ready to get married immediately. But his counterpart, his wife, has to be on par with him to be able to bring about this union. And whenever he inquires regarding his future wife, she's still not ready. She doesn't, as they say, she doesn't have her act together. So the Chafetz Chaim says, Hashem is ready immediately to purge existence from all evil. The question is, where are we at? Are we ready for that? Have we achieved enough within our own lives, opportunity-wise, what God provided us? Are we ready for real time? So Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, says, I'm ready to make the announcement for the coming when you're ready. So it's up to you. If you do that quality tshuva and bring your actions to that special level, I announce it's coming immediately. God is able to come at any time. He's able to send the Mashiach anytime. But the world is not ready for that, because you're not ready for that. What exactly is the value of the Jewish people? The value of the Jewish people is that through what we were given at Sinai, all the means, the positive and negative commandments, the Torah itself, through those various mediums, we bring about perfection. What is perfection? The Navi says, the prophet says to the Jewish people, why did God create this world? L'chvodi barosif. For my glory, I created this world. Not God doesn't need glory. It means that when the Jewish people recognize God's glory, then they're worthy to be exposed to God's glory. But what's an indicator that you appreciate God's glory? If you're fully invested to bring that about, that means you're worthy of God's glory, to have that relationship. But if you want to have God's glory without contributing to it, without making sacrifices for it, you have the ability to make choices, and your choices are not in sync with God's glory, what does that say about you? It means you're not ready for God's glory. You're not there yet. You're not sufficiently developed. Because if you would be, you'd be behaving differently. A person is given a certain task, and he's supposed to finish the task in 30 days. And it's a very important task. And the person who gave him the task explained to him how important it is. And it's of the utmost importance to be finished in 30 days. 30 days comes, and 30 days was more than enough time. The man is weeks behind. So the person says to him, who gave him the test, what have you been doing? Says, you realize I was doing this, I was doing that, I was distracted. He says to him, if you would appreciate and understand what originally I explained to you, the value of completing this task, you wouldn't have been distracted. You wouldn't give anything of value other than this. That you were able to give anything other than this value, it's clear you didn't appreciate the value. Because if you would have appreciated the value, you'd be focused on this, and you would have been there. You're not there indicates that you really fully don't appreciate the value. If God's glory only comes through what? Through following his prescription of life, using his mediums, which he explained to us, the value of those mediums. It brings about a level of spirituality. It brings about a level of purification. It gives you the ability to internalize and appreciate what that is. And yet you make other choices. That means you're not ready. You're not worthy of God's glory because you didn't participate in bringing about God's glory. That's the understanding. And that's what Elio says to this great rabbi. He could come today. You have to be ready. But what brings about that readiness? Us showing and indicating what we value. And what's value? There's an expression, put your money where your mouth is. That's real, that's reality. Just don't talk the talk, walk the walk. That's what they used to say. And if you do that, you can only do your best. You can't do more than your best. And if you're trying and you're committed to that, then God will bring the glory. Because you've done your best to invest in that glory. That's the understanding. But the task of bringing God's glory upon who's that? Who's that incumbent upon? Not the nations of the world. That's incumbent upon the Jew. Because at Sinai, God gave us that responsibility to assume that task. And the task is up to us. How long it will be or how short it will be. We're delayed, God's delayed. The ultimate chesed, kindness of God is that even if we're not worthy, at the end of time, if he has to come, he's coming. Meaning, before he has to come, it's up to us to bring him sooner. But if time is running out and evil is rearing its head to the point where it's not going to happen and we're not going to initiate it, God will initiate it. Even though we're not worthy, how he initiated it. And I always quote the Talmud. The Talmud says that even if God has to install a king whose decrees are more evil than Haman, Harasha, Haman, the evil one, and we cannot tolerate the pain and the suffering. But you realize when a person has that level of experience, it brings about a certain level of clarity. We understand what's most important and what has no value. And God will do that. But where are we at? What have we accomplished? We passed over endless opportunity. The answer is, as long as you have an appreciation for the truth and you recognize the value of God, and the proof of it is you do tshuva. Even though you do tshuva because the pain is intolerable. You can't contend with the evil decrees and edicts of this king, the anti-Semitism. Doesn't make a difference. It's interesting. There's a famous verse in Koheles. The King Solomon says, Elokim yivakish es hanirdof. God favors the pursued. The pursued. So, and we explain, why does God favor the pursued? Because a whole recounting from beginning history, how God in each situation always favored the pursued, whether it was after Cain killed Abel or had his skirmish with Abel. He favored Abel's sacrifice. Noach was pursued by members of his generation. He was favored by God. Avraham was pursued by Nimrod, who threw him in the kiln. He was favored. Yitzchak was pursued by Ishmael. Therefore, he was favored. Yaakov was pursued by Esau. Yosef pursued by his brothers. Moshe was pursued by Pharaoh. The Jewish people are pursued by the nations of the world. So whoever is the pursued, God favors the pursued. So in a certain way, even if you're holding at a point of no hope, but if God puts you in a pursued position, that is the basis to be favored. So it says, Mashiach come, either you're all meritorious or you're not meritorious at all. If you're meritorious, then you're deserving. You've earned the glory. What about if you're not meritorious? God will put you in a situation to be pursued. It'll be a king whose decrees are more evil than Haman. When you're in a position of pursued, God will favor you. But the only way you can have a relation with God is you have to do tshuva. God will give you the clarity, you'll be able to do tshuva. So being in a pursued state, that itself is the basis for the merit to have a relationship with him. Because God favors the pursuit. Very interesting. We read in the curses of the Torah, there's what we call paranoia. The person's paranoid. He thinks people are banging on his windows at night and people are plotting to kill him, and it's all in his mind. Person's schizophrenic. He has voices. The voices are in his head. And there's no voices. The tocha, the curse of the Torah is you're going to be so traumatized by the enemy, even when they're not pursuing you, you think you're being pursued. There's no pursuer. But in your mind, emotionally, you feel consumed by this fear that you're being pursued. So a great rabbi said, Rav Mordechai Pragromansky said, that's the curse. If there be a pursuer, God intervenes and favors the pursued. What happens if there's no pursuit? There's no pursuer. It's all in your mind. If that's the case, God doesn't come to your defense. If there's a pursuer, God comes to your defense. If there's no pursuer and it's in your mind and you're not worthy, as they said, it's over. You'll be destroyed. So to have a pursuer is something positive, regardless of the pain of the pursuer and the hurt that he brings upon you, but ultimately you're going to come out on top because God favors the pursuit. However, you see, seemingly, from the closing of the first bracha in the Amidah, it says, "Umevi go livnei v'neim." It says, "Zochechas de'avos." God remembers the kindness of the patriarchs. Umevi go livnei v'neim. What does that mean? If he remembers the kindness of the patriarchs, and that's why we still have choice, because there's merit that gives us opportunity to make choices. What happens if all that merit is depleted? We've exhausted all the merit. Or maybe God will bring the Redeemer to their descendants. Why? Not them worthy. For the sake of his name, out of love. We're not worthy, but it's for the sake of his name, out of love. That means God will create a setting to allow us to be in a position that he should favor us for the sake of his name. Because if at the end of time, the Jewish people are driven into the oblivion, God's name is disgraced. Because God's name is synonymous with the Jewish people. We are God's representation in this world. So if he lets us, God forbid, being destroyed by the evil, what happens to the name of God? He will bring the Redeemer, L'man Shmo B'Yavo, for the sake of his name, with love. Love for us. This goes back to Sinai, because we were the only nation who unequivocally accepted what he offered us for the sake of his glory. As a result of that, for his love, he would bring the Redeemer. But how does he bring him? We have to do tshuva. That goes in Elokim Vakesh Nirdof. Because God favors the pursuer. The pursued over the pursuer. Automatically, through the pursued will be destroyed. I once mentioned a midrash. The prophets say the Jewish people are compared to a boulder. We're called Even Yisrael. The boulder of Yisrael. What do I mean, boulder of Yisrael? All the civilizations that try to annihilate us, where are they? The Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, where are they? They all went into the dustbins of history. And where are we? We have our valleys, but we have our peaks. We always we have a resiliency, we always bounce back. Once they've gone out of existence, they're out of existence as significant powers. The Jewish people call it Even Yisrael, the boulder of Israel. Now, so the Midrash explains it with an allegory that in the medieval times, you had people that were like Atlas, very strong people, and they would have contests. They'd have a boulder weighing a number of tons. And if the person's able to lift this boulder, he would win a purse of gold. And for hundreds of years, people were trying to tackle this boulder and they weren't able to. But not only weren't able to tackle the boulder, if you lift something of great weight, if you bring it up to a certain point, and it's above the person's, up high on the person's body, if you lose your balance, you get crushed under that boulder. When you get it up to a point, you have to throw it away for yourself. Otherwise, the boulder comes down and crushes that person. So for centuries, these very powerful men, they lifted it to a point and they thought they tackled it. Rather than tackling the boulder crushed it. And that's Jewish history. All the civilizations throughout history, they thought they were going to tackle the Jews. They're going to actually snuff out our existence. Rather than us being snuffed out, they were snuffed out through us. That's what happened. That's Jewish history. Therefore, the prophet says, it's Even Yisrael. We are the boulder of Israel. The boulder who crushed all their enemies. But how did we crush them? How? Because we the pursued and they were the pursuers. When you're the pursued, God favors the pursued. And he destroys the pursuer. So in a certain way, even though we were in exile and we pursued, but ultimately the end of the day is it had a boomerang effect. We came back. Because when we were in exile, what did our oppressors do to us? They wanted to destroy us. Because he wanted to destroy us, that means we're pursued. Once we're pursued, God favors the pursued, he destroys the pursuer. And that's at the end of time. I've created this world for my glory. What happens if you have no relevance to my glory? I will give you the ability to do tshuva. So you should appreciate my glory. But why are you worthy? You're worthy. You're not worthy on your own accord. Your worthiness comes because you're pursued. And when you're pursued, you come to certain realizations, and those realizations allow you to be favored. Because now that you're favored, God will give you the capacity to appreciate his glory. What would this be analogous to? Person has a healthy eye, and he has a very thick cataract. But to be able to remove the cataract and not to injure the eye, you need that expert surgeon. To peel it off, it should come off easily, and none of the tissue of the eye should be damaged. Who's the expert surgeon? God himself. He knows exactly the procedure that is needed. If you do tshuva, the tshuva vaporizes all the blockages. If you repent on your own, and if you're doing well, if you toe the line and you continuously spiritualize yourself, you're upgrading. What happens if you don't? As they say, God puts you in that vice and he turns the screws to the point that you realize, you come to certain realizations. There's no longer taking things for granted. As a result of that, now all of a sudden, you begin seeing and you have clarity, because the soul of the Jew, there's nothing comparable to it, has the capacity, except that it has all these coatings, these coverings. It's embedded in spiritual grime and filth. God has to scrape it away. It has to be peeled off. If you ever see people restoring antiques, restoration, over the millennia, there were like layers of paint and all kinds of things. They have to, with chemicals, they have to strip away all the various layers. And eventually you see the beauty of that original wood or that workmanship. Same thing. God strips away all the blockage. And once the blockage is stripped, then the eye sees clearly. Then the soul vibrates and reverberates due to seeing exactly what God is. And when you're there, now you're ready for real time. And that's what it means. Even if in terms you're unworthy in your own right, God will create a setting to bring about that worthiness. As a result of being pursued, you're going to come to that level of realization. It's interesting. My son, Mayor Simcha, fills in for me about a little over 2 months ago. He had surgery on his knee, on his leg. And he was walking first with crutches. Then he was walking with one crutch. Then he was walking with a cane. And he has a 4-year-old boy, one of his children. And his little boy says to him, after you fully recover, are you going to remember when you weren't able to walk naturally, normally? That's the question his 4-year-old son asked him. So at first he thought it was a comment. So he waited for the afternoon. He says, what did you ask me in the morning? He says, I asked you, when you get back to yourself and you have no longer pain in your leg and you walk normally, are you going to remember when you couldn't walk normally, without the crutch, without the cane, without the walker? You understand? We have short memories. When you're under the gun and you have the pain, you appreciate what you no longer have. And that appreciation gives you certain understandings and appreciation. Once you get back to the easiness of life, seamless function, we have short memories, we forget. And that was the question. Do you remember? Don't you remember? The key is to remember. If you remember, and that's why, if you remember, then you understand the consequences of your behavior. And then it's real time. If not, it's only abstract. So to be able to remember and appreciate when you didn't have, then you appreciate what you do have. We'll stop here.